She also had hungers, and I jotted down 5 hungers in her. And these are things that she experienced and are part of our reflection day. One is the hunger for meaning on the journey. What's it all about, Alfie? The other possibility is that our lives are absurd. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I often think of our planet Earth, around that kind of insignificant sun, flying through space at 10,000 miles an hour, in a vast galaxy, which is surrounded by hundreds of other galaxies, and here we are, little peanut Earth. We say, what's it all about, Elfie? What's the meaning of life? And again, we come back to William Blake. He said, we're put on Earth a little space that we learn to bear the beams of love. So we're here to be loved, give love away, and the heart of meaning. Number 2, we hunger for commitment. We hunger for giving our lives to someone or something on the journey. One of my favorite people in history is Dag Hammarskjöld. He was Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was in a plane crash in September of 1961. He was from Sweden, head of the United Nations for 8 years from 1953 to 61. He's on a peace mission in Africa, and the plane was probably shot down, and all 18 people were killed. And on his desk in his office in New York was a manuscript. And in that manuscript, he said on it, he said, if something happens to me on my travels, you can publish this. It was published in his journal in a book called Markings. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. It's still available. It's still in print. And it says, reflections on life on the journey. He was totally committed as an international civil servant. And he did so much good in so many areas of the world. And in one of his notes, he said, my 2 favorite countries, I found this interesting, were Burma and New Zealand. And interesting, 2 favorite countries. But he was a committed civil servant, and he gave his life. Number 3, a third hunger that Mary experienced, and that is part of our life as well, is a hunger for depth. The other possibility is superficiality, just kind of touching bases. I was at a Christmas party in December, and it was there for about a half hour, and I met 15 people. I didn't get anybody. I mean, I introduced them, but no real encounter. You know, sometimes we're looking for a real encounter, for serious conversations. I was just kind of moving through life. And so the call to have depth, quality, and not quantity on the journey. Number 4 is a realization that there's a brokenness in all of our lives. The nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty, I think you all know that one. It's in New Zealand as well, or in Australia. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, and all the king's men and women, but put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I was at a play at Holy Martyrs of Gorkum, one of our parishes, and it was a murder mystery. 168 kids in school, they're all in the play. First graders were followers, the second graders were sheep, and it was a big murder mystery. And the crime that was committed, the crime was, who pushed Humpty Dumpty off the wall? That was the question. You're not going to believe this. You know who did it? Little Bo Peep. She was walking by the wall and just happened to nudge him. He fell off the wall and broke apart. And what really scared me was when I got to the school, it was Little Bo Peep that greeted me. Murders, you know. But fortunately, as an audience, they had a right to make a judgment, and we exonerated her. She was not guilty of the crime. You and I are Humpty Dumptys. We're broken. Every one of us. Sometimes physically, sometimes psychologically, sometimes spiritually. We need somebody to put us back together again. I love St. Paul. He, in Romans chapter 7, things I do, I don't want to do. I don't do that. Things I don't want to do, I do. I'm all mixed up inside. St. Paul, in the center of Romans, the great epistle that he's fragmented, he's broken, and no one's going to put me together again except the Lord Jesus. I often wonder in my own life, the distance between my head, what I think, my heart, what I feel, what I do, the cognitive, affective, and behavioral. And I was asking the Lord one day, I said, well, what's the distance between my head and my heart? And he didn't answer. So I took a tape measure out. It was about 16 inches. And the Lord chuckled and said, Morno, the difference between what you think and what you feel is 2 light years. 2 light years. And so there's a gap in our life, personally. And then we call that alienation, we call that fragmentation, brokenness. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our essayists, said that everything God made has a crack in it. They're all crackpots. And the Lord puts us back together again. Henry Nouwen, one of our writers, the Dutch writer, says, we are wounded healers, or wounded, and therefore we are to heal. And that gives us compassion too. I think sometimes our brokenness, our sorry mistakes, are ways in which we have compassion for others. And so that call to wholeness. And then number 5, a call that Mary experienced, which is probably the deepest of all, and that is the call to intimacy. We can't stand isolation. The word for that is H-E-L-L. And so we can't stand being separated. And the whole purpose of the church and our sacramental life is for union with God and unity among ourselves. That's the goal. And with this union and unity, there's peace and joy. And so we're looking at that call to oneness on the journey.